Okay, so we'll start here with chapter 8. So this is the gift for the darkness. And again, on chapter 7, it kind of ends up where they're staying up in the fort for now. And they eventually ended up going up to the top of the mountain and they saw what they thought was a beast. What we know is just a dude in a parachute. So Piggy looked up miserably from the dawn pale beach to the dark mountain. Are you sure? Really sure? I mean, I've told you a dozen times now, said Ralph. We saw it. Do you think we're safe down here? How the hell should I know? And Ralph jerked away from him and walked a few paces along the beach. Jack was kneeling and drawing a circular pattern in the sand with his forefinger, and Piggy's voice came to them, hushed. Are you sure? Really? Go up and see, said Jack contemptuously, and good riddance. No fear. The beast had teeth, said Ralph, and big black eyes. He shuddered violently, and Piggy took off his one round glass and polished the surface. What are we going to do? Ralph turned towards the platform, and the conch glimmered among the trees. A white blob was in place where the sun would rise. He pushed back his mop. I don't know. He remembered the panicked flight down the mountainside. I don't think we'd ever fight a thing that size. Honestly, you know. We'd talk, but we wouldn't fight a tiger. We'd hide. Even Jack could hide. And Jack still looked at the sand. What about my hunters? And Simon came stealing out of the shadows by the shelter. Ralph ignored Jack's questions, and he pointed to the touch of yellow above the sea. As long as there's light, we're brave enough. But now that thing squats by the fire as though it didn't want us to be rescued. And he was twisting his hands now unconsciously. His voice rose. So we can't have a signal fire. We're beaten. A point of gold appeared above the sea, and once all the sky lightened. What about my hunters? Boys armed with sticks. Jack got to his feet. His face was red, and he marched away. Piggy put on his glass and looked at Ralph. Now you've done it. You've been rude about his hunters. Oh, shut up. The sound of the inexpertly blown conch interrupted them. As though he was serenading the rising sun, Jack went on blowing till the shelters were astir, and the hunters crept to the platform, and the little ones whimpered, as now they so frequently did. Ralph rose obediently, and Piggy, and they went to the platform. So Jack ends up getting embarrassed here. What does he do? He chooses to call a meeting. Jack does not handle embarrassment well. Talk, said Ralph bitterly. Talk. He took the conch from Jack. This meeting, Jack interrupted him. I called it. If you hadn't called it, I should have. You just blew the conch. Well, isn't that? Oh, take it. Go on, talk. Ralph thrust the conch into Jack's arm and sat down on the trunk. I've called an assembly because of a lot of things. First, you know now, we've seen the beast. We crawled up. We were only a few feet away. The beast sat up and looked at us. I don't know what it does. We don't even know what it is. The beast comes out of the sea, out of the dark trees. Quiet, said Jack. You listen. The beast is sitting up there, whatever it is. Perhaps it's waiting. Hunting. Yes, hunting. Hunting, said Jack. He remembered his age-old tremors in the forest. Yes, the beast is a hunter. Only shut up. The next thing is that we couldn't kill it. And the next thing is that Ralph said my hunters are no good. I never said that. I've got the conch. Ralph thinks you're all cowards, running away from the boar and in the forest. And that's not all. There was a kind of sigh on the platform as if everyone knew what was coming. Jack's voice went on, tremulous yet determined, pushing against the uncooperative silence. He's like Piggy. He says things like Piggy. He isn't a proper chief. So now, his defiance is out in the open. Jack clutched the conch to himself. He's a coward himself. For a moment he paused, then he went on. On top, Roger and me went on. He stayed back. I went too, after. The two boys glared at each other through the screens of the hair. I went too, said Ralph, and then I ran away, and so did you. Call me a coward, then. And Jack turned to the hunters. He's not a hunter. He'd never have got us meat. He isn't a prefect, and we don't know anything about him. He just gives orders and expects people to obey for nothing. All this talk, shouted Ralph. Talk. Who wanted it? Who called the meeting? And Jack turned, red in the face. His chin sunk back, and he glowered up under his eyebrows. All right, then, he said in tones of deep meaning and menace. All right. So again, he gets embarrassed again. He held the conch against his chest, and with one hand stabbed the air with the index finger. Who thinks Ralph ought to be chief? Who thinks Ralph should not be chief? He looked around expectantly at the boys ranged round, who had frozen. Under the palms, there was the deadly silence. Hands up, said Jack strongly. Whoever wants Ralph not to be chief. The silence continued, and breathless and heavy and full of shame. Slowly the red drained from Jack's cheeks and then came back with a painful rush. He licked his lips and turned his head at an angle so that his gaze avoided the embarrassment of Lincoln with another's eyes. How many think? His voice trailed off. The hand that held the conch shook. He cleared his throat and spoke loudly. All right, then. So again, no one said, not even did he not get votes, no one even said that Ralph should not be chief. So, you can imagine the shame that he's feeling right now. He laid the conch with great care in the grass at his feet. The humiliating tears were running from the corner of each eye. I'm not going to play any longer, not with you. So again, he views this entire thing as playing, right? Most of the boys looked down now at the grass or at their feet, and Jack cleared his throat again. I'm not going to be a part of Ralph's lot. He looked along the right-hand logs, numbered the hunters that had been acquired. I'm going off by myself. He can catch his own pigs. Anyone who wants to hunt when I do can come too. And he blundered out of the triangle towards the drop to the white sand. Jack turned and looked back to Ralph. For a moment he paused and then cried out, high-pitched, enraged, no. He leapt down from the platform and ran along the beach, paying no heed to the steady fall of his tears, and until he dived into the forest, Ralph watched him. So Piggy was indignant. I've been talking to Ralph, and you just stood there like, softly looking at Piggy and not seeing him, Ralph spoke to himself. He'll come back. When the sun goes down, he'll come back. He looked at the conch in Piggy's hand. What? Well, there. Piggy gave up the attempt to rebuke Ralph. He polished his glass again and went back to the subject. We can do without Jack Merridew. There's others besides him on this island. But now we really got a beast, though I can hardly believe it, and we need to stay close to the platform. There'll be less need of him and his hunting, so we can really decide on what's what. There's no help, Piggy, nothing to be done. For a while they sat in depressed silence, and then Simon stood up and took the conch from Piggy. He was so astonished that he remained on his feet. And Ralph looked up at Simon. Simon, what is it this time? A half sound of jeering ran round the circle, and Simon shrank from it. I thought there might be something to do, something we, against the pressure of the assembly, again, the pressure of the assembly took his voice away. He sought for help and sympathy and chose Piggy. He turned half towards him, clutching the conch to his brown chest. I think we ought to climb the mountain. The circle shivered with dread, and Simon broke off and turned to Piggy, who was looking at him with an expression of derisive incomprehension. What's the good of climbing up to this here beast when Ralph and the others couldn't do anything? And Simon whispered his answer. What else is there to do? His speech he allowed Piggy to lift the conch out of his hands, and then he retired and sat as far from the others as possible. Piggy was speaking now with more assurance, and if the circumstances had not been so serious, the others would have recognized his pleasure. I said we could all do without a certain person. Now I say we got to decide what can be done, and I think I could tell you what Ralph's going to say next. The most important thing on this island is the smoke, and you can't have no smoke without a fire. Ralph made a restless move. No, go, Piggy. We've got no fire. That thing sits up there. We'll have to stay here. Piggy lifted the conch as though to add power to his next words. We got no fire on the mountain. What's wrong with a fire down here? A fire could be built on them rocks, on the sand even. We'd make smoke just the same. That's right, smoke by the bathing pool. The boys began to babble, and only Piggy could have the intellectual daring to suggest moving the fire from the mountain. So we'll have to have the fire down here, said Ralph. He looked about him. We can build it in here, just between the bathing pool and the platform, of course. So, just a side note here, the second Jack's gone, people actually are listening to Piggy. He broke off, frowning, thinking the thing out, unconsciously tugging at the stub of a nail with his teeth. Of course, the smoke won't show so much, not to be seen so far away, but we needn't go near and the others nodded in perfect comprehension. There would be no need to go near. We'll build the fire now. The greatest ideas are the simplest. Now there was something to be done, and they worked on with passion. Piggy was so full of delight and expanded liberty in Jack's departure, so full of pride in his contribution to the good of society, that he helped to fetch wood. The wood he fetched was close at hand, a fallen tree on the platform that they did not need for the assembly. Yet to the others, the sanctity of the platform had protected even what was useless there. Then the twins realized that they would have a fire near them as comfort in the night, and this set a few little ones dancing and clapping hands. The wood was not so dry as the fuel that they had used up on the mountain. Much of it was damply rotten and full of insects that scurried. Logs had to be lifted from the soil with care, and they crumbled into sodden powder. And more than this, in order to avoid going deep into the forest, the boys worked near at hand on any fallen wood, no matter how tangled with new growth. The skirts of the forest and the scar were familiar, near the conch and the shelters, and sufficiently friendly in the daylight. What they might become in darkness, nobody cared to think. They worked, therefore, with great energy and cheerfulness, though as time crept by, there was a suggestion of panic in the energy and the hysteria in the cheerfulness. They built a pyramid of leaves and twigs, branches and logs on the bare sand by the platform, and for the first time on the island, Piggy himself removed his one glass, knelt down, and focused the sun on tinder, and soon there was a ceiling of smoke and a bush of yellow flame. The little ones who had seen few fires since the first catastrophe became wildly excited. They danced and sang, and there was a partyish air around the gathering. At last, Ralph stopped working and stood up, smudging the sweat from his face with a dirty forearm. We'll have to have a small fire. This one's too big to keep up. And Piggy sat down carefully on the sand and began to polish his glass. We could experiment. We could find out how to make a small hot fire and then put green branches on to make smoke. Some of them leaves must be better than the others. So again, you're starting to see like Piggy's really more comfortable with sharing his thoughts now and trying to analyze stuff. The little ones stopped singing and dancing and drifted away towards the sea on the fruit trees or the shelters. Ralph flopped up down on the sand. We'll have to make a new list of who's to look after the fire, if you can find them. And he looked around, and then for the first time, he saw how few big ones there were, and understood why the work had been so hard. Where's Maurice? Piggy wiped his glass again. No, he wouldn't go into the forest by himself, would he? And Ralph jumped up, ran swiftly around the fire, and stood by Piggy, holding up his hair. But we've got to have a list. That's you and me and Sam and Eric and he would not look at Piggy, but spoke casually. Where's Bill and Roger? Piggy leaned forward and put a fragment of wood on the fire. I expect they've gone. I expect they won't play either. Ralph sat down and began to poke little holes in the sand. He was surprised to see that one had a drop of blood on it. He examined his bitten nail closely and watched the little globe of blood that gathered where the quick was gnawed away. And Piggy went on speaking. I seen them stealing off when we were gathering wood. They went that way, the same way as he went himself. And Ralph finished his inspection and looked up into the air. The sky, as if in sympathy with the great changes among them, was different today, and so misty that in some places the hot air seemed white. The disk of the sun was a dull silver, as though it was nearer and not so hot, and yet the air stifled. They're always making trouble, haven't they? And the voice came near his shoulder and sounded anxious. We can't do without them. We'll be happier now. We can do without them. We'll be happier now, won't we? And Ralph sat. The twins came, dragging a great log and grinning in their triumph. They dumped the log among the embers so that the sparks flew. We can do all right on our own, can't we? And for a long time, while the log dried, caught fire and burned red hot, Ralph sat in the sand and said nothing. He did not see Piggy go to the twins and whisper to them, nor how the three boys went into the forest. Here you are. He came to himself with a jolt. Piggy and the other two were by him, and they were laden with fruit. I thought perhaps we ought to have a feast, kind of. And the three boys sat down. They had a great mass of fruit with them, and all of it properly ripe. They grinned at Ralph as he took some and began to eat. Thanks, he said, and then with an accent of pleased surprise, thanks. Do all right on our own, said Piggy. It's them that haven't no common sense that make trouble on the island. We'll make a little hot fire. And Ralph remembered what had been worrying him. Where's Simon? I don't know. You don't think he's climbing the mountain? And Piggy broke into a noisy laughter and took more fruit. He might be. He gulped at his mouthful. He's cracked. Simon had passed through the area of the fruit trees, but today the little ones had been too busy with the fire on the beach, and they had not pursued him there. He went on among the creepers until he reached the great mat that was woven by the open space and crawled inside. Beyond the greens of the leaves, and the sun peeled down and the butterflies danced in the middle their unending dance. He knelt down and the arrow of the sun fell on him. That other time in the air seemed to vibrate with the heat, but now it threatened. Soon the sweat was running from his long coarse hair, and he shifted restlessly, but there was no avoiding the sun. Presently he was thirsty, and then very thirsty, and he continued to sit. Far off along the beach, Jack was standing before a group of boys. He was looking brilliantly happy. Hunting, he said, and he sized them up.
Each of them wore the remains of a black cap, and ages ago they had stood in two demure rows, and their voices had been the song of angels. We'll hunt. I'm going to be the chief. And they nodded, and the crisis passed easily. And then, about the beast, they moved, looking at the great forest. I say this, we aren't going to bother about the beast. We're going to forget about the beast. That's right, yes, forget the beast. If Jack was astonished by their fervor, he did not show it. And another thing, we shan't dream so much down here. This is near the end of the island, and they agreed passionately out of the depths of their tormented private lives. Now listen, we might go to the castle, we might go later to the castle rock, but now I'm going to get more of the big ones away from the conch and all that. We'll kill a pig and give a feast. He paused and went on more slowly. And about the beast, then we'll kill it and leave some of the kill for it. Then it won't bother us, maybe. So his plan is to try and lure more people away from Ralph, and then, kill a pig, eat, and then give some of the beast some of it. And he stood up abruptly. We'll go into the forest now and hunt. And they turned and trotted away for a moment, and they followed him obediently. They spread out nervously in the forest. Almost at once, Jack found the dug and scattered roots that told the pigs, and soon the track was fresh. And Jack signaled the rest of the hunt to be quiet and went forward by himself. He was happy and wore the damp darkness of the forest like his old clothes. He crept down a slope to the rocks and scattered trees by the sea. The pigs lay, loaded bags of fat, sensuously enjoying the shadows under the trees. There was no wind, and they were unsuspicious, and the practice made Jack silent as the shadows. He stole away again and instructed his hidden hunters. Presently, they all began to inch forward, sweating in the silence and the heat. Under the trees, an ear flapped idly, and a little apart from the rest, sunk into the deep maternal bliss, lay the largest sow of the lot. She was pink and black, and the great bladder of her belly was unfringed with a row of piglets that slept or burrowed and squeaked. 50 yards from them drove Jack, and his arm, straightening, pointed at the sow. He looked round in inquiry to make sure that everyone understood, and the other boys nodded at him. The row of arms slid back. Now, the drove of pigs started up. At a range of only 10 yards, the wooden spears with fire-hardened points flew towards the chosen pig. One piglet, with a demented shriek, rushed into the sea, trailing Roger's spear behind it. The sow gave a gasping squeal and staggered up, with two spears sticking in her fat flank. And the boys shouted and rushed forward. The piglets scattered, and the sow burst the advancing line and went crashing through the forest after her. They raced along the pig track, but the forest was too dark and tangled so that Jack, cursing, stopped them and cast them on the trees. Then he said nothing for a long time, but breathed fiercely so that they were awed by him and looked at each other in uneasy admiration. Presently, he stabbed down the ground with his finger. There. Before the others could examine the drop of blood, Jack had swerved off, judging a trace, touching a bough that gave. So he followed, mysteriously right and assured, and the hunters trod behind him. And then he stopped before a covert. There. They surrounded the covert, but the sow got away with the sting of another spear in her flank. The trailing butts hindered her, and the sharp cross points were a torment. She blundered into a tree, forcing a spear still deeper, and after that, any of the hunters could follow her easily enough by the drops of vivid blood. The afternoon wore on, hazy and dreadful with damp heat. The sow staggered her way ahead of them, bleeding and mad, and the hunters followed, weeded to her in lust, excited by the long chase and the dropped blood. They could see her now, nearly got up with her, but she spurred with her last strength and went ahead of them again. They were just behind her when she staggered into an open space where the bright flowers blew and the butterflies danced round and round, and the air was hot and still. Here, struck down by the heat, the sow fell, and the hunters hurled themselves at her. This dreadful eruption from an unknown world made her frantic. She wheeled and buckled, and the air was full of sweat and noise and blood and terror. Roger ran around the heap, prodding with his spear whenever pig flesh appeared. Jack was on top of the sow, stabbing downwards with his knife. Roger found a lodgment for his point and began to push till he was leaning with his whole weight. The spear moved forward inch by inch, and the terrified squealing became a high-pitched scream. Then Jack found the throat, and the hot blood spouted over his hands. The sow collapsed under them, and they were heavy and fulfilled upon her. The butterflies still danced, preoccupied at the center of the clearing. At last, the immediacy of the kill subsided. The boys withdrew back, and Jack stood up, holding out his hands. Look. He giggled and flicked them, while the boys laughed at his reeking palms. And then Jack grabbed Maurice and rubbed the stuff over his cheeks. Roger began to withdraw his spear, and the boys noticed it for the first time. Roger stabilized the thing in a phrase which was received uproariously. Right up her ass. Did you see that? Did you hear what he said? Right up her ass. This time Maurice and Robert and Maurice acted the two parts, and Maurice's acting of the pig's effort to avoid the advanced spear was so funny that the boys cried with laughter. At length, even this palled, Jack began to clean his bloody hands on a rock, and then he soon started to work on the sow and paunched her, looking at the hot bags of colored guts, pushing them into a pile on the rock while the others watched him. He talked while he worked. We'll take the meat along the beach. I'll go back to the platform and invite them to a feast. That should give us time. Roger spoke. Chief, how can we make a fire? So again, Jack never thought it out, right? Jack squatted down and frowned at the pig. We'll raid them and take fire. There must be 4 of you, Henry and you, Bill and Maurice. We'll put on paint and sneak up. Roger can catch a branch while I say what I want. The rest of you can go, can get this back to where we were. We'll build the fire there. And after that, he paused and stood up, looking at the shadows under the tree. His voice was lower when he spoke again. But we'll leave part of the kill for it. He knelt down again and was busy with his knife. The boys crowded around him, and he spoke over his shoulder to Roger. Sharpen a stick at both ends. Presently, he stood up, holding the dripping sow's head in his hands. Where's the stick? Here. Round one end into the earth. Oh, it's rock. Jam it in that crack. There. Jack held up the head and jammed his soft throat down on the pointed end of the stick that he pierced through into the mouth. He stood back and the head hung there, a little blood dribbling down the stick. Instinctively, the boys drew back too, and the forest was very still. They listened to the loudest noise, which was the buzzing of the flies over the spilled guts. And Jack spoke in a whisper, pick up the pig. Maurice and Robert skewered the carcass, lifted the dead weight and stood nearby, and in the silence, standing over the dry blood, they looked suddenly furtive. Jack spoke loudly, the head is for the beast, it's a gift. The silence accepted the gifts and awed them. The head remained there, dim-eyed, grinning faintly, blood blackening between its teeth. All at once, they were running away as fast as they could through the forest towards the open beach. Simon stayed where he was, a small brown image concealed by the leaves. Even if he shut his eyes, the sow's head still remained like an after image. The half-shut eyes were dim with the infinite cynicism of adult life. They assured Simon that everything was a bad business. I know that. Simon discovered that he had spoken aloud. He opened his eyes quickly, and there was the head, grinning amusedly in the strange daylight, ignoring the flies, the spilled guts, even ignoring the indignity of being spiked on a stick. He looked away, licking his dry lips. A gift for the beast. Might not the beast come for it? The head, he thought, appeared to agree for him. Run away, said the head silently. Go back to the others. It was a joke, really. Why should you bother? You were wrong, that's all. A little headache, something you ate perhaps. Go back, child, said the head silently. Simon looked up, feeling the weight of his wet hair, and gazed at the sky. Up there, for once, were clouds, great bulging towers that sprouted away over the island, gray and creamy and copper-colored. The clouds were sitting on the land, and they squeezed, produced moment by moment this close, tormenting heat. Even the butterflies deserted the open space with which this obscene thing grinned and dripped. Simon lowered his head, carefully keeping his eyes shut, and sheltered them with his hands. There were no shadows under the trees, but everywhere a pearly stillness, so that what was real seemed elusive and without definition. The pile of guts was a black blob of flies that buzzed like a saw, and after a while these flies found Simon. Gorged, they alighted by the runnels of his sweat and drank. They tickled under his nostrils and played leapfrog on his thighs. They were black and iridescent and without numbers. And in front of Simon, the lord of the flies, the pig's head, hung on his stick and grinned. At last Simon gave up and looked back. He saw the white teeth and dim eyes, the blood and his gaze that was held by the ancient, inescapable recognition. In Simon's right temple, a pulse began to beat on the brain. So the Lord of the Flies, the title here references that pig's head. Ralph and Piggy lay in the sand, gazing at the fire and idly flicking pebbles into the smokeless heart. That branch is gone. Where's Sam and Eric? We ought to get some more wood. We're out of green branches. And Ralph sighed and stood up. There were no shadows under the palms of the platform, only this strange light that seemed to come from everywhere at once, and high up among the bulging clouds, thunder went off like a gun. We're gonna get buckets of rain. What about the fire? Ralph trotted into the forest and returned with a wide spray of green, which he dumped on the fire. The branches crackled, the leaves cuddled, and the yellow smoke expanded. Piggy made an aimless little pattern in the sand with his fingers. The trouble is, we haven't got enough people for a fire. You got to treat Sam and Eric as one. They do everything together, of course. Well, that isn't fair, don't you see? They ought to do 2 turns. And Ralph considered this and understood. He was vexed to find how little he thought like a grown-up inside a gang, and the island was getting worse and worse. Piggy looked at the fire. You'll want another green branch soon. And Ralph rolled over. Piggy, what are we going to do? We'll just have to do without them, but the fire. He frowned at the black and white mesh which lay at the unburnt edges of the branches and began to formulate. I'm scared. He saw Piggy look up and blundered on. Not of the beast, I mean. I'm scared of that too, but nobody else understands about the fire. If someone threw you a rope when you were drowning, if a doctor said take this because if you don't take it, you'll die. You would, wouldn't you? Of course I would. Can't they see? Can't they understand? Without the smoke signal, we'll die here. Look at that. A wave of heated air trembled above the ashes, but without a trace of smoke. We can't keep one fire going, and they don't care. And what's more, he looked intensely into Piggy's streaming face. What's more, I don't sometimes. Supposing I got like the others, not caring, what would become of us? And Piggy took off his glasses, deeply troubled. I don't know, Ralph. We've just got to go on. That's all. That's what grown-ups would do. Ralph began the business of unburdening himself. Continued. Piggy, what's wrong? Piggy looked at him with astonishment. Do you mean no, not it. What makes things break up like they do? Piggy rubbed his glasses slowly in thought, and when he understood how far Ralph had gone towards accepting him, he flushed pink with pride. I don't know, Ralph. I expect it's him. Jack. A taboo was evolving around that word too. Yes, I suppose it must be. And the forest near them burst into an uproar. Demonic figures with faces of white and red and green rushed out howling, so that the little ones fled screaming. And out of the corner of his eyes, Ralph saw Piggy running. 2 figures rushed at the fire and he prepared to defend himself, but they grabbed the half-burnt branches and raced away along the beach. The 3 others stood still, watching Ralph, and he saw that the tallest of them, stark naked, save for paint and a belt, was Jack. Ralph held his breath back and spoke. Well? Ralph ignored him, lifted his spear, and began to shout. Listen, all of you, me and my hunters. We're living them on the beach by a flat rock. We'll hunt and feast and have fun. If you want to join my tribe, come and see us. Perhaps I'll let you join, perhaps not. He paused and looked around. He was safe from the shame or self-consciousness behind the mask of his paint and could look at each of them in turn. So this is the first time when when Jack is speaking that he's really able to look at people in their eyes. Ralph was kneeling by the remains of the fire like a sprinter at his mark, and his face was half hidden by hair and smut. Sam and Eric appeared together around a palm tree at the edge of the forest, and a little on Howe, priest and crimson by the bathing pool, and Piggy stood on the platform, the white conch gripped in his hands. Tonight we're having a feast. We've killed a pig and we got meat. You can come and eat with us if you'd like. And up in the cloud canyons, the thunder boomed again. Jack and the other 2 anonymous savages with him swayed and looked up and recovered. The little ones went on howling. Jack was waiting for something. He whispered urgently to the others, go on now. The 2 savages murmured, and Jack spoke sharply, go on. The 2 savages looked at each other, raised their spears, and spoke in time. The chief has spoken. So again, he's all about theatrics. The 3 of them turned and trotted away, and presently Ralph rose to his feet, looking at the place where the savages had vanished. Sam and Eric came, talking in a weed whisper. I thought it was, and I was scared. Piggy stood above them on the platform, still holding the conch. That was Jack and Maurice and Robert, said Ralph. Aren't they having fun? I thought I was going to have asthma. Sucks to your asthma. When I saw Jack, I was sure he'd go for the conch. Can't think why. The group of the boys looked at the white shell with affectionate respect, and Piggy placed it in Ralph's hands and the little ones, seeing the familiar symbol, started to come back. Not here. He turned towards the platform, feeling the need for ritual. Fire first went Ralph, the white conch cradle, and then Piggy, very grave, then the twins, and then the little ones and the others. Sit down, all of you. They rated us for fire. They're having fun, but Ralph was puzzled by the shudder that flicked in his brain. There was something he wanted to say, and then the shudder had come down. And then they were regarding him gravely, not yet troubled by any doubt about his sufficiency. Ralph pushed the idiot hair out of his eyes and looked at Piggy. The fire, of course the fire. He started to laugh and then stopped and became fluent instead. The fire is the most important thing. Without the fire, we can't be rescued. I'd like to put on war paint and be a savage, but we must keep the fire burning. The fire is the most important thing on the island because, and he paused again at the silence became folded out in wonder, and Piggy whispered again, urgently, rescue. Oh yes, without the fire, we can't be rescued. So we must stand by the fire and must make smoke. And when he stopped, no one said anything. And after many brilliant speeches that had been made on this very spot, Ralph's remarks seemed lame, even to the little ones. At last, Bill held out his hand for the conch. Now we can't have fire up there because we can't have the fire up there. We need more people to keep it going. Let's go to this feast and tell them the fire's hard on the rest of us. And then hunting and all that. Being savages, I mean. It must be jolly good fun. And Sam and Eric took the conch. That must be fun, like Bill says, as he invited us to a feast, meat, crackling. I could do with some meat. And Ralph held up his hand. Why shouldn't we get our own meat? The twins looked at each other and Bill answered, we don't want to go into the jungle. And Ralph grimaced. He, goes. He's a hunter. They're all hunters. They're different. No one spoke for a moment, and then Piggy muttered to the sand, meat. The little one sat, solemnly thinking of meat and dribbling, and overheard a cannon boomed again, and the dry palm fronds clattered in a sudden gust of hot wind. You are a silly little boy, said the Lord of Flies. So this is back to Simon. Just an ignorant, silly little boy. Simon moved his swollen tongue, but said nothing. Don't you agree, said the Lord of the Flies. Aren't you just a silly little boy? And then Simon answered him in the same silent voice. Well then, said the Lord of the Flies, you better run off and play with the others. They think you're batty. You don't want Ralph to think you're batty, do you? You like Ralph a lot, and don't you? And Piggy and Jack. Simon's head was tilted slightly up. His eyes could not break away, and the Lord of the Flies hung in the space before him. What are you going to do out here all alone? Aren't you afraid of me? And Simon shook. There isn't anyone to help you, only me, and I'm the beast. Simon's mouth labored, brought forth inaudible words. Pig's head on a stick. Fancy thinking that the beast was something you could hunt and kill, said the head. And for a moment, the two of the forest and all the other dimly appreciated places echoed with the parody of laughter. You knew, didn't you? I'm part of you. Close, close, close. I'm the reason why it's no-go, why things are what they are, why things are falling apart. The laughter shivered again. Come now, said the Lord of Flies. Get back to the others, and we'll forget the whole thing. Simon's head wobbled and his eyes were half closed, as though he knew he wasn't imitating the obscene thing on the stick. He knew that one of his times was coming on. The Lord of the Flies was expanded like a balloon. This is ridiculous. You know perfectly well you'll only meet me down there, so don't try to escape. So you'll only meet me down there. And remember, he's the beast. Simon's body was arched and stiff, and the Lord of the Flies spoke in the voice of a schoolmaster. This has gone far enough. My poor misguided child, do you think you know better than I do? And there was a pause. I'm warning you, I'm going to get waxy. Do you see? You're not wanted, understand? You're going to have fun on this island, understand? We are going to have fun on this island, so don't try it on me, my poor misguided boy, or else. And Simon found he was looking into a vast mouth. There was a blackness within, a blackness that spread. Or else, said the Lord of the Flies, we shall do you. See? Jack and Roger, Maurice and Robert, and Bill and Piggy and Ralph. Do you see? And Simon was inside the mouth. He fell down and lost consciousness. So Simon ends up getting consumed by the beast. Again, this is not literally though. So one thing to note here is Simon probably has epilepsy or some other medical condition. So he's having one of his quote unquote moments, probably having a seizure. So no, this dead pig's head on the stick is not actually talking to him. Now, this is gonna be an important quote that we will come back to later, so all of that was on that page, with the pig talking to Simon is fairly important, as a whole. Okay, we're gonna read chapter 9, and then after chapter 9, we'll go for a break. It'll be a little bit of an earlier break. Over the island, the buildup of clouds continued, and a steady current of heated air rose all day from the mountain and was thrust to 10,000 feet. Revolting masses of gas piled up in the static until the air was ready to explode. By early evening, the sun had gone, and a brassy glare had taken the place of clear daylight. Even the air that pushed in from the sea was hot and held no refreshment. Colors drained from the water and trees and the pink surface of the rock, and all the white and brown clouds brooded. Nothing prospered but the flies who blacked their lord and made the spilt guts look like a heap of glistening coal. Even when the vessel broke in Simon's ear and the blood gushed out, that they left him alone, preferring the pig's high flavor. With the run of the blood, Simon's fit passed into the weariness of sleep. He lay down in a matter of creepers, while the evening advanced and the cannon continued to play. At last he woke and saw the dimly dark earth close by his cheek. Still, he did not move, but lay there, his face sideways on the earth, his eyes looking dully before him. Then he turned over, drew his feet under him, and laid hold of the creepers to pull himself up. When the creepers shook, the flies exploded from the guts and with a vicious note and clamped back down again. Simon got to his feet. The light was unearthly. The Lord of the Flies hung on his stick like a black ball. And Simon spoke aloud to the clearing. What else is there to do? Nothing replied. Simon turned away from the open space and crawled in through the creepers till he was on the dunk of the forest. He walked drearily between the trunks, his face empty of expression, and the blood was dripped dry round his face and chin. Only sometimes, as he lifted the ropes of creepers and chose his direction from the trend of the island, he mouthed words that did not reach the air. Though he's not in a good physical condition, he can't even really talk right now. Presently, the creepers festooned the trees less frequently, and there was a scatter of pearly light from the sky down through the trees. This was the backbone of the island, the slightly higher land that lay beneath the mountain where the forest was no longer jungle. Here there were wide spaces interspread between thickets and huge trees, and the trend of the ground led him up as the forest opened. He pushed on, staggering sometimes with his weariness, but never stopping. The usual brightness was gone from his eyes, and he walked with a sort of glum determination, like an old man. A buffet of wind made him stagger, and he saw he was out in the open, on rock, under a brassy sky. He found his legs were weak, and his tongue gave him pain all the time. When the wind reached the mountaintop, he could see something. He could see something happen, a flicker of blue stuff against the brown clouds. He pushed himself forward, and the wind came again, stronger now, cuffing the forest heads till they ducked and roared, and Simon saw a hump thing suddenly sit on the top and look down at him. He hid his face and toiled on. The flies had found the figure too. The lifelike movement would scare them off for a moment so that they made a dark cloud round the head, but then as the blue material of the parachute collapsed and the corpulent figure would bow forward, sign, and the flies settled once more. Simon felt his knees smack the rock. He crawled forward and soon he understood. The tangle of lines showed him the mechanics of this parody. He examined the white nasal bones, the teeth, the colors of corruption. He saw how pitilessly the layers of rubber and canvas held together the poor body that should be rotten away, and the breathing foully at him. Simon knelt on all fours and was sick till his stomach was empty. Then he took the line in his hands. He freed them from the rocks and the figure from the wind's indignity. So he finds this corpse that's been on the top of the mountain that they mistook as the beast. At last he turned away and looked down at the beaches. The fires by the platform appeared to be out, or at least making no smoke. Further along the beach, beyond the little river and near the great slab of rock, a little trickle of smoke was climbing into the sky. Simon, forgetful of the flies, shaded his eyes with both hands and peered at the smoke. Even at that distance, it was possible to see that most of the boys, perhaps all of the boys, were there. So they had shifted the camp then, away from the beast. And as Simon thought this, he turned to the poor broken thing that sat sinking by his side. The beast was harmless and horrible, and the news must reach the news as soon as possible. He stared down the mountain and his legs gave way beneath him. Even with great care, the best he could do was a stagger. Bathing, said Ralph. That's the only thing to do. Piggy was inspecting the luminous sky through his glass. I don't like the clouds. Remember how it rained just after we landed? Going to rain again. Ralph dived into the pool and a couple of little ones were playing at the edge, trying to extract comfort from a wetness warmer than blood. Piggy took off his glasses, stepped primely into the water, and then put them on again. Ralph came to the surface and squirted a jet of water at her. Mind my specs, said Piggy. If I get water on the glass, I gotta get out and clean them. Ralph squirted and missed again. He laughed at Piggy, expecting him to retire meekly as usual, and in pained silence. Instead, Piggy beat the water with his hands. Stop it, he said. Do you hear? And furiously, he drove the water into Ralph's face. All right, said Ralph. Keep your hair on. I got a pain in my head. I wish the air was cooler. I wish the rain would come. I wish we could go home. Piggy lay back against the sloping sand slide of the pool. His stomach protruded and the water dried on him. Ralph squirted up at the sky. One could guess at that moment that the sun of the progress of a light work among the clouds. He knelt in the water and looked everyone round. I looked around. Where's everybody? Piggy sat up. Perhaps they're lying in the shelter. Where's Sam and Eric? Where's Bill? And Piggy pointed to the platform. That's where they got him. Jack's party. Let them go, said Ralph uneasily. I don't care. Just for some meat. And for hunting, said Ralph wisely. And for pretending to be a tribe and put it on war paint. Piggy stirred the sand under the water, and he did not look up at Ralph. Perhaps we ought to go too. Ralph looked up at him quickly, and Piggy blushed. I mean, to make sure nothing happens. And Ralph squirted water again. Long before Ralph and Piggy came up to Jack's lot, they could hear the party. There was a stretch of grass in a place where the palms left a wide band of turf between the forest and the shore. Just one step down from the edge of the turf was the white, blown sand of above high water, warm, dry, trodden. Below that again was a rock that stretched away towards the lagoon, and beyond that was a stretch of sand and then the edge of the water. A fire burned on a rock, and fat dripped from the roasting pig meat onto the invisible flames. All the boys of the island, except Piggy, Ralph, Simon, and the two tending the pig, were grouped at the forest. So everyone's here. They were laughing, singing, lying and squirting, or standing on the grass, holding food in their hands. But to judge by their greasy faces, the meeting was almost done, and some held coconut shells in their hands, and they were drinking from them. But the party had started. Before the party had started, a great log had been dragged into the center of the lawn, and Jack, painted and garlanded, sat there like an idol. There were piles of meat on the green leaves near him, and the fruit and the coconut shells full of drink. So again, he's kind of like being treated like a king here. Ralph and Piggy came to the edge of the grassy platform, and the boys, as they noticed them, fell silent one by one, till only the boy next to Jack was talking. And then the silence intruded even there, and Jack turned where he sat. For a time, he looked at them, and the crackle of the fire was the loudest noise over the burden of the reef. Ralph looked away, and Sam, thinking that Ralph must have turned to him accusingly, put down his own gnawed bone with a nervous giggle. Ralph took an uncertain step, pointed to a palm tree, and then whispered something inaudible to Piggy, and then they both giggled like Sam. Lifting his feet high out of the sand, Ralph started to stroll past, and Piggy tried to whistle. At this moment, the boys who were cooking at the fire suddenly hauled off a great chunk of meat and ran with it towards the grass. They bumped Piggy, who was burnt, and yelled and danced. Immediately, Piggy and the crowd of boys were united and relieved by a storm of laughter. Piggy once more was the center of social derision, so that everyone felt cheerful and normal. So again, they're in this awkward silence. How do you break the awkward silence? Well, let's just go hurt Piggy. And even Ralph laughed, right? So Jack stood up and waved his spear. Take them some meat. The boys with the spit gave Ralph and Piggy each a succulent chunk. They took the gift, dribbling, so they stood and ate beneath the sky of thunderous brass, rain with the storm coming. The boys with the spit gave Jack waved his spear again. Has everyone eaten as much as they want? There was still food left, sizzling on the wooden spits, heaped on the green platters. Betrayed by his stomach, Piggy threw down a picked bone on the beach and stopped for more. And Jack spoke again, impatiently, has everyone eaten as much as they want? His tone conveyed a warning, given out of pride of ownership, and the boys ate faster while there was still time. Seeing there was no immediate likelihood of pause, Jack rose from the log so that his throne and sauntered to the edge of the grass. He looked down from behind his paint at Ralph and Piggy. They moved a little further off the sand, and Ralph watched the fire as he ate. He noticed, without understanding, how the flames were visible now against that dull light. Evening was come, not with calm beauty, but with the threat of violence. And Jack spoke, "Give me a drink." Henry brought him a shell, and he drank, watching Piggy and Ralph over the jagged rib. Power lay in the brown swell of his forearms. Authority sat on his shoulders and chattered in his ear like an ape. All sit down. The boys ranged themselves and rose on the grass before him, but Ralph and Piggy stayed a foot low, standing on the soft ground. Piggy ignored them. Jack ignored them for a moment, turned his mask down to see the boys, and pointed at them with his spear. Who was going to join my tribe? And Ralph made a sudden movement that became a stumble. Some of the boys turned towards him. "I gave you food," said Jack, "and my hunters will protect you from the beasts. Who will join my tribe?" "I'm chief," said Ralph, "because you chose me, and we were going to keep the fire going. Now you run after food." "You ran yourself," shouted Jack. "Look at that bone in your hands." And Ralph went crimson. "I said you were hunters. That was your job." And Jack ignored him again. "You'll join my tribe and have fun." "I'm chief," said Ralph tremulously. "And what about the fire? And I've got the conch." "You haven't got it with you," said Jack, sneering. "You left it at the behind. See, clever. And the conch doesn't count at this end of the island." And all at once, thunder struck. Instead of the dull boom, there was a point of impact in the explosion. "The conch counts here too," said Ralph, "and all over the island." "Well, what are you going to do about it then?" And Ralph examined the ranks of boys. There was no help in them, and he looked away, confused and sweating. Piggy whispered, "The fire, rescue." "Who will join my tribe?" "I will. Me, I will." "I'll blow the conch," said Ralph breathlessly, "and call an assembly. We shan't hear it." Piggy touched Ralph's wrist. "Come on, there's going to be trouble, and we've had our meat." And there was a blink of blind light beyond the forest, and the thunder exploded again, so that a little one started to whine. Big drops of rain fell among them and started making individual sounds when they struck. "Going to be a storm," said Ralph, "and you'll have rain like when we dropped here. Who's clever now? Where are your shelters? What are you going to do about that?" And the hunters looked uneasily at the sky, flinching from the drops of smoke, from the smoke stroke of the drops, and a wave of recklessness set the boys swaying and moving aimlessly. The flicker and light became brighter, and the blows of thunder were only just bearable, and the little ones began to run about, screaming. Jack leapt onto the sand. "Do our dance. Come on, dance." And he ran stumbling through the thick sand to the open space of rock beyond the fire. Beneath the flashes of lightning, the air was dark and terrible, and the boys followed him clamorously. Roger became the pig, grunting and charging at Jack, who sidestepped. The hunters took their spears, and the cooks took spits, and the rest clubs of firewood. While Roger mimed the terror of the pig, the little ones ran and jumped on the outside of the circle. Piggy and Ralph, under the threat of the sky, found themselves eager to take place in this demented but partly secure society. They were glad to touch the brown backs of the fence that hemmed in the terror and made it governable. Kill the beast, cut his throat, spill his blood. The moment became regular while the chant lost its first superficial excitement and began to beat like a steady pulse. Roger ceased to be a pig and became a hunter, so that the center of the ring yawned emptily. Some of the little ones started a ring of their own, and the contemporary circles went round and round, as though repetition would achieve safety of itself. There was a throb and a stamp of a single organism. The dark sky was shattered by a blue-white scar. An instant later, the noise was on them like the blow of a gigantic whip, and the chant rose in a tone of agony. Kill the beast, cut his throat, and spill his blood. Against the blue-white scar, the blue-white scar jagged above them, and the sulphurous explosion beat down. The little ones screamed and wandered about, fleeing from the edge of the forest, and one of them broke the reins of the big uns in his terror. Him. The circle became a horseshoe. A thing was crawling out of the forest. It came darkly, uncertainly. The shrill screaming that rose before the beast was like a pain. The beast stumbled into the horseshoe. Kill the beast, cut his throat, spill his blood. The blue-white scar was constant, the noise unendurable. Simon was crying out something about a dead man on a hill. Kill the beast, cut his throat, spill his blood, do him in. The sticks fell, and the mouth of the new circle crunched and screamed. The beast was on its knees in the center, its arms folded over its face. It was crying out against the abominable noise about something on a body on a hill. The beast struggled forward, broke the rein, and fell over the steep edge of the rock to the sand by the water. At once the crowd surged after it, poured down by the rock, leapt onto the beast, screamed, struck, bit, tore. There were no words and no movements but the tearing of teeth and claws. And then the clouds opened and let down a rain-like waterfall. The water bounded from the mountaintop, tore leaves and branches from the trees, poured like a cold shower over the struggling heap on the sand. Presently, the heap broke up and figures staggered away. Only the beast lay still, a few yards from the sea. Even in the rain, they could see how small of a beast it was, and already its blood was in the sand, stained in the sand. Now, with a great wind, blew the rain sideways, cascading the water from the forest trees. On the mountaintop, the parachute filled and moved. The figure slid, rose to its feet, spun, swayed down through the vastness of wet air, and trod with ungainly feet towards the top of the high trees. Fallen, still fallen, it sank towards the beach, and the boys rushed screaming into the darkness. The parachute took the figure forward, furrowing into the lagoon, and bumped it over the reef and out to sea. Towards midnight, the rain ceased and the clouds drifted away, so that the sky was scattered once more with the incredible lamp of stars. Then the breeze died too, and there was no noise save for the drip and trickle of water that ran out by the clefts and spilled down, leaf by leaf, to the brown earth of the island. The air was cool, moist, and clear, and presently even the sound of water was still. The beast lay huddled on the pale beach, and the stains spread, inch by inch. The edge of the lagoon became a streak of phosphorescence, which advanced minutely, so as the great wave of the tide flowed. The clean water mirrored the clean sky and the angular bright constellations. The line of phosphorescence bulged about the sand grains and the little pebbles. It held them each in a dimple of tension, and suddenly accepted them with an inaudible syllable and moved on. Among the shoreward edge of the shallows, the advance in clearness was full of strange, and the moonbeam-bodied creatures with fiery eyes. Here and there was a larger pebble clung to its own air, and covered with a coat of pearls. The tide swelled in over the rain-pitted sand and smothered everything with a layer of silver. Now it touched the first of the stains that seeped up from the broken body, and the creatures made a moving patch of light as they gathered at the edge. The water rose further and dressed Simon's coarse hair with brightness. The line of his cheek silvered, and the turn of his shoulder became sculptured marble. The strange attendant creatures, with their fiery eyes and trailing vapors, busied themselves round the head. The body lifted a fraction of an inch from the sand, and a bubble of air escaped from the mouth of the wet plot, and then it turned gently into the water. Somewhere over the darkened curve of the earth, of the world, the sun and the moon were pulling, and the film on the earth, and the film of water on Earth's planet was held, bulging slightly on one side, so that the solid core turned. The great wave of the tide moved further along the island, and the water lifted, softly, surrounded by a fringe of inquisitive, bright creatures. Instead, a silver shape beneath the steadward constellations, Simon's dead body moved out towards the open sea. So that creature that they thought was the beast was actually Simon, and they eventually end up beating him to death. And what scared them off was that parachute that Simon had freed. Like, he untangled the lines. There was a strong wind, it blew it from the trees, and they saw that and ran away. Okay, so why don't we take our break there? So quite a bit earlier here. We'll come back at about 10:30. We still got one more chapter to read that we'll do today, but that won't be immediately. So give you guys 15 minutes here.
I have not gotten that back yet. Let me just follow up with it. I haven't gotten anything back yet, but I will do that. That'll be on the 29th. The 2 weeks from now. Both of them, yeah. Yeah. Um, no, so that's the actually just the grad ceremony. I don't know the like, I'm gonna guess, well, if people don't have transportation, we'll probably have that arranged, but I'm not sure yet. In fact, I think I have a meeting today about that. Let me check my calendar. Yes, I have a meeting today about that, so I'm gonna guess I will hear the final details today. The reading essentials are the one, it's kind of a mix match depending on each chapter. The reading essentials are ones you don't have to do anymore. If there is something, it would be the study guides. So we will end up reading chapter 10 today, and we'll finish the book tomorrow. But I just want to start out here with just some thoughts here for these first two chapters that we've gone through. So yes, so chapter 8. So basically what we ended up happening here is Jack calls a meeting. Jack calls a meeting and a vote for a new chief. The vote fails, right? Because Jack's like, Jack wants to be chief, right? And not a single person votes for Jack. So what does Jack do whenever he's embarrassed? He runs away or he resorts to violence. And so Jack runs away in embarrassment. So eventually, what ends up happening is some boys join Jack. They hunt a pig and they come to the realization that crap, we don't have fire. So what are they going to do? They're going to raid. They raid Ralph and they steal fire. Now, after they steal in the fire, Jack invites everyone to join him. They leave a pig's head to the beast, which we know doesn't exist. And Simon sneaks away and passes out. So we also ended up here with chapter 9. So Simon wakes up. Simon wakes up. He climbs the mountain. What does he find? He finds this beast. He finds the parachute and body, and he frees it. So ultimately, he ends up, so he walks towards Jack's camp, where everyone is feasted. And this is where Jack invites everyone to join. And all do join him. Except for Ralph and Piggy, right? So everyone but Ralph and Piggy joins him. So at the feast, what ends up happening is it starts raining. You know, we get that really bad thunderstorm. It's dark, it's loud, you can't see, you can't hear. Everyone starts to dance. We would call this a frenzy. And ultimately, what ends up happening is Simon enters the dance and gets killed. And both bodies go out to sea, his body and the parachute's body. So I'll give you another minute there. So what's going to happen is we will finish reading chapter 10, and then we'll go over the characters and the symbols here, as well as we'll have an extra hunt or two to talk about. We'll get going in about 1 minute. Okay. So let's get up and running here. Chapter 10. So the shell and the glasses. Yeah, not too. Okay. So Piggy eyed the advancing figure carefully. Nowadays, he sometimes found that he saw more clearly if he removed his glasses and shifted the one lens to the other eye. But even through the good eye, after all that had happened, Ralph remained unmistakably Ralph. He came out of the coconut trees, limpid, dirty, with dead leaves hanging from his shock of yellow hair. One eye was a slit in his puffy cheek, and a great scab had formed on his right knee. He paused for a moment and peered at the figure of the platform. Piggy, are you the only one left? There's some little ones. They don't count. No big uns? Oh, Sam and Eric. They're collecting wood. Nobody else. Ralph climbed onto the platform carefully, and the coarse grass was still worn away where the assembly used to sit. The fragile white conch still gleamed by the polished seat. Ralph sat down in the grass, facing the chief's seat and the conch. Piggy knelt at his left, and for a long minute there was silence. At last, Ralph cleared his throat and whispered something. Piggy whispered back, "What you say?" Ralph spoke up. Simon, they realized. Piggy said nothing, but nodded solemnly. They continued to sit, gazing with the impaired sight at the chief's seat and the glittering lagoon. The green lights and the glossy patches of sunshine played over their befouled bodies. At length, Ralph got up and went to the conch. He took the shell carelessly with both hands and knelt, leaning against the trunk. Piggy, what are we going to do? Piggy nodded at the conch. You could call an assembly. Ralph laughed sharply as he said the word, and Piggy frowned. You're still chief. And Ralph laughed again. You are, over us. I got the conch. Ralph, stop laughing like that. Look, there ain't no need, Ralph. What's the others going to think? And at last Ralph stopped. He was shivering. Piggy? That was Simon. You said that before. Piggy, that was a murder. You stop it, said Piggy shrilly. What good are you doing talking like that? He jumped to his feet and stood over Ralph. It was dark. There was that bloody dance. There was that lightning and the thunder and the rain. We was scared. I wasn't scared, said Ralph slowly. I don't know what I was. We was scared, said Piggy excitedly. Anything might have happened. It wasn't what you said. He was gesticulating, searching for a formula. Oh, Piggy. Ralph's voice, low and stricken, stopped Piggy's gesture. He bent down and waited, and Ralph, cradled the conch, rocked himself to and fro. Don't you understand, Piggy? The things we did, he may still be, no. Perhaps he was only pretending. And Piggy's voice trailed off at the sight of Ralph's face. You were outside the circle. You never really came in. You didn't see what we did, what they did. There was a loathing and at the same time a kind of feverish excitement in his voice. Don't you see, Piggy? Not all that well. I only got one eye now. You ought to know that, Ralph. And Ralph continued to rock to and fro. It was an accident, said Piggy suddenly. That's what it was, an accident. His shrill voice again. Coming in the dark. He had no business crawling like that out of the dark. He was batty. He asked for it. He gesticulated widely again. It was an accident. You didn't see what they did. Look, Ralph, we've got to forget this. We can't do no good thinking about it, see? I'm frightened of us. I want to go home. Gods, I want to go home. It was an accident, said Piggy stubbornly, and that's that. He touched Ralph's bare shoulder, and Piggy shuddered at the human contact. And look, Ralph, Piggy glanced around suddenly, and then leaned close. Don't let on that we was in that dance, not to Sam and Eric. But we were, all of us, and Piggy shook his head. Not us till last. They never noticed us in the dark. And anyway, you said I was the only one on the outside. So was I, muttered Ralph. I was on the outside too. And Piggy nodded eagerly. That's right. We was on the outside. We never did nothing. We never saw nothing. And Piggy paused, then went on. We'll live on our own, four of us. We aren't enough to keep the fire burning. We'll try. See, I lit it. And Sam and Eric came dragging a great log out of the forest. They dumped it by the fire and turned it to the pool. Ralph jumped to his feet. Hi, you two. The twins checked for a moment and then walked on. They're going to bathe, Ralph. Better get it over. The twins were very surprised to see Ralph. They flushed and looked past him in the air. Hello, fancy meeting you, Ralph. We've been in the forest to get wood for the fire. We got lost last night. And Ralph examined his toes. You got lost after the... And Piggy cleaned his lens. After the feast, said Sam in a stifled voice. And Eric nodded. Yes, after the feast. We left early, said Piggy quickly, because we were tired. So did we. Very early. We were very tired. Sam touched a scratch on his forehead and then hurriedly took his hand away. Eric fingered his split lip. Yes, we were very tired, repeated Sam. So we left early. Was it a good? The air was heavy and an unspoken knowledge. Sam twisted and the obscene word shot out of him. Dance. And memory of the dance that none of them had attended shook all four boys convulsively. We left early. When Piggy came to the neck of the land, he joined the castle rock to the mainland, and he was not surprised to be challenged. He had reckoned during the terrible night on finding at least some of the tribe holding out against the horrors on the island of the safest place. The voice rang out sharply from on high, and then the diminishing crags were balanced one on another. Halt, who goes there? Roger. Advance, friend. Roger advanced. You could see who I was. The chief said we got to challenge everyone, and Roger peered up. You couldn't stop me coming if I wanted. Couldn't I? Climb up and see. And Roger climbed it up the ladder-like cliff. And look at this. A log had been jammed under the topmost rock, and another lever under that. Roger leaned lightly on the lever, and the rock groaned. A full effort would send the rock thundering over down to the neck of the land. So if you recall from the earlier chapters, this was the rock that they noticed that they could easily push over. He's a proper chief, isn't he? Robert nodded. He's going to take us hunting. He jerked his head in the direction of the distant shelters where a thread of white smoke climbed up in the sky. Roger, sitting at the very edge of the cliff, looked somberly back at this island as he worked a finger at a loose tooth. His gaze settled at the top of the distant mountain, and Roger changed the unspoken subject. He's going to beat Wilfred. What for? Robert shook his head doubtfully. I don't know. He didn't say. He got angry and made us tie Wilfred up. He giggled excitedly. He's been tied up for hours, waiting. But didn't the chief say why? I never heard him. Sitting on the tremendous rocks in this horrid sun, Roger received news as Roger received this news as an illumination. He ceased to work at his tooth and sat still, assimilating the possibilities of irresponsible authority. And then, without another word, he climbed down the back of the rocks towards the cave and the rest of the tribe. The chief was sitting there, naked to his waist, his face blocked out in white and red. And again, this mask, when he is masked, that has relevance. The tribe lay in a semicircle before him. The newly beaten and untied Wilfred was sniffling noisily in the background, and Roger squatted with the rest. Tomorrow, went on the chief, we shall hunt again. And he pointed at the savage and that with his spear. Some of you will stay here to improve the cave and defend the gate. I shall take a few hunters with me and bring back meat. The defenders of the gate will see that others don't sneak in. And a savage raised his hand, and the chief turned a bleak, painted face towards him. Why should they try to sneak in, chief? The chief was vague but earnest. They'll try to spoil things we do, so the watchers of the gates must be careful. And then the chief paused. They saw a triangle of sparkling pink dart out, pass along his lips, and then vanish again. And then the beast will try to come in. You remember how he crawled. And the semicircle shuddered and muttered in agreement. He came disguised. He may come again, even though we gave him the head of our kill to eat. So watch and be careful. And Stanley lifted his forearm off the rock and held up an interrogative finger. Well, but didn't we? He squirmed and looked down. No. In the silence that followed, each savage flinched away from his individual memory. No, how could we kill it? Half relieved, half daunted by the implication of further terrors, the savages muttered again. So leave the mountain alone, said the chief, solemnly, and give it to the head if you go hunting. And Stanley flicked his finger again. I expect the beast disguised itself. Perhaps, said the chief. A theological speculation presented itself. We'd better keep on the right side of him anyhow. You can't tell what he might do. And the tribe considered this, and they were shaken, as if by a flaw of wind. The chief saw the effect of his words and stood abruptly. But tomorrow we'll hunt, and when we've got meat, we'll have a feast. Bill put up his hand. Chief, yes. What'll we use for lighting the fire? And the chief's blush was hidden by the white and the red clay. Into his uncertain silence, the tribe spilled their murmur once more, and then the chief held up his hand. We shall take fire from the others. Tomorrow we'll hunt and get meat. Tonight I'll go along with 2 hunters. Who'll come? Maurice and Roger put up their hands. Maurice, yes, chief. Where was their fire? Back at the old place by the fire rock. And the chief nodded. The rest of you go to sleep as soon as the sun sets, but us 3, Maurice, Roger, and me, we've got work to do. We'll leave just before sunset. Maurice put up his hand. But what happens if we meet? And the chief waved his objections aside. We'll keep along the sands. Then if he comes, we'll do our dance again. Only the 3 of us. And again, the murmur swelled and died. Piggy handed Ralph his glasses and waited to receive back his sight. The wood was damp, and this was the 3rd time they had lighted it. Ralph stood back, speaking to himself. We don't want another night without fire. And then looked round guttedly at the three boys standing by. This was the first time that he had admitted the double functions of the fire. Certainly, one was to send up a beckoning column of smoke, but the other one was to be a hearth now and a comfort until they slept. Eric breathed on the wood till it glowed and sent out a little flame. A billow of white and yellow smoke reeked up. Piggy took back his glasses and looked at the smoke with pleasure. If only we could make a radio or a plane or a boat. Ralph dredged in his fading knowledge of the world. We might get taken prisoner by the Reds, and Eric pushed back his hair. They'd be better than he would not name people, and Sam finished the sentence for him by nodding along the beach. Ralph remembered the ungainly figure on a parachute. He said something about a dead man. He flushed painfully at this admission that he had been present at the dance. He made urgent motions at the smoke with his body. Don't stop. Go on up. Smoke's getting thinner. We need more wood already, even if it's wet. My asthma. The response was mechanical. Sucks to your asthma. If I pull logs about, I get my asthma bad. I wish I didn't, Ralph, but there it is. The three boys went into the forest and fetched armfuls of rotten wood. Once more, the smoke rose, thick and yellow. Let's get something to eat. Together they went to the fruit trees, carrying their spears, saying little, cramming in haste. And when they came out of the forest again, the sun was setting, and the only embers glowed in the fire, but there was no smoke. I can't carry any more wood, said Eric. I'm tired. And Ralph cleared his throat. We kept the fire going up there. Up there it was small, but this has to be a big one. Ralph carried a fragment to the fire and watched the smoke that drifted into the dust. We've got to keep it going. And Eric let himself down. I'm too tired. And what's the good? Eric, cried Ralph in a shocked voice. Don't talk like that. And Sam knelt by Eric. Well, what is the good? And Ralph tried indignantly to remember. There was something good about a fire, something overwhelmingly good. Ralph's told you often enough, said Piggy moodily. What else are we going to do to get rescued? Of course, if we don't make smoke. And he squatted before them in the crowd and dust. Don't you understand? What's the good of wishing for radios and boats? He held out his hand and twisted his fingers into the fist. There's only one thing we can do to get out of this mess. Anyone can play at hunting. Anyone can get us meat. And he looked from face to face. And then at the moment of greatest passion and conviction, the curtain flapped in his head and he'd forgotten what he'd been driving at. He knelt there, his fist clenched, gazing solemnly from one or the other, and then the curtain whisked back. Oh yes, so we've got to make smoke and more smoke. But we can't keep it going. Look at that. The fire was dying on them. And so when the fire dies, so does their hopes of surviving. 2 to mind a fire, said Ralph, half to himself. That's 12 hours a day. We can't get any more wood, Ralph, not in the dark, not at night. We can light it every morning. Nobody ain't going to see smoke in the dark. And Sam nodded vigorously. It was different when the fire was up there. Ralph stood up, feeling curiously defenseless, with the darkness peering in. Let the fire go, then, for tonight. He led the way to the first shelter, which still stood, although battered. The bed leaves lay within, dry and noisy to touch. In the next shelter, a little one was talking in his sleep. The 4 big ones crept into the shelter and burrowed under the leaves. The twins lay together, and Ralph and Piggy at the other end. For a while there was a continual creak and a rustle of leaves as they tried for comfort. Piggy, yeah? Suppose so. All right, suppose so. And at length, save for an occasional rustle, the shelter was silent. An oblong of blackness revealed with brilliant spangles hung before them, and there was a hollow sound of surf on the reef. Ralph settled himself for his nightly game of supposing. Suppose they could be transported home by jet. Then before morning they would land at the big airfield in Wiltshire. They would go by car. No, for things to be perfect, they would go by train, all the way down to Devon and take the cottage again. Then at the foot of the garden, the wild ponies would come up and look over the wall. Ralph turned restlessly in the leaves. Dartmoor was wild, and so were the ponies, but the attraction of the wilderness was gone. His mind skated to the consideration of a tamed town where savagery could not set foot. There it is. What else could be safer than the bus center with its lamps and wheels? All at once, Ralph was dancing with a lamp standard. There was a bus crawling out of the bus station, a strange bus. Ralph, what is it? Don't make a noise like that. Sorry. And from the darkness of the further end of the shelter came a dreadful moaning, and they shattered the leaves in their feet. Sam and Eric, locked in an embrace, were fighting each other. Sam, Eric, hey, Eric. And presently, all was quiet again. Piggy spoke softly to Ralph. We've got to get out of this. What do you mean, get rescued? For the first time that day, and despite crowding blackness, Ralph sniggered. I mean it, whispered Piggy. If we don't get home soon, we'll be barning. Round the bend, bomb happy, crackers. Ralph pushed the damp tendril of hair out of his eyes. You write a letter to your auntie. Piggy considered this solemnly. I don't know where she is now, and I haven't got an envelope with a stamp, and there ain't a pillar box or a postman. And the success of his tiny joke overcame Ralph. His sniggers were becoming uncontrollable, and his body jumped and twitched. Piggy rebuked him with dignity. I haven't said anything all that funny. Ralph continued to snigger through though his chest hurt, and his twitchings exhausted him as he lay still, breathless, and woe-begone, waiting for the next spasm. During one of these pauses, he was ambushed by sleep. Ralph, you've been making a noise again. Do be quiet, Ralph, because Ralph heaved over among the tree leaves. He had reason to be thankful that his dream was broken, for the bus had become nearer and more distinct. Why? Because. Be quiet and listen. Ralph lay down carefully to the accompaniment of a long sigh from the leaves. Eric moaned something and then lay still. The darkness, save for the useless oblong of stars, was blanket thick. I can't hear anything. There's something moving outside. Ralph's head prickled. The sound of his blood drowned all else and then subsided. I still can't hear anything. Listen for a long time, and quite clearly and emphatically, and only a yard or so away from the back of the shelter, a crack. The blood roared again in Ralph's ear. Confused images chased each other through his mind. A composite of these things was prowling around the shelter, and he could feel Piggy's hand against his shoulder, the convulsive grip of a hand. Shut up and listen. Desperately, Ralph prayed that the beast would prefer little ones, and a voice whispered horribly outside, Piggy, Piggy. It's come, gasped Piggy, it's real. He clung to Ralph and reached to get his breath. Piggy, come outside. I want you, Piggy. Ralph's mouth was against Piggy's ear. Don't say anything. Piggy, where are you, Piggy? Something brushed against the back of the shelter, and Piggy kept still for a moment. Then he had his asthma. He arched his back and crashed him on the leaves with his legs. Ralph rolled away from him. There was a vicious snarl in the mouth of the shelter, and then the plunge and thump of living things. Someone tripped over Ralph, and Piggy's corner became a complication of snarls and crashes and flying limbs. Ralph hit out, then he and what seemed like a dozen others were rolling over and over, hitting, biting, scratching. He was torn and jolted, found fingers in his mouth and bit them. A fist withdrew and came back like a piston, so that the whole shelter exploded into light. Ralph twisted sideways on top of a withering body and felt hot breath on his cheek. He began to pound the mouth below him, using his clenched fist like a hammer. He hit with more and more passionate hysteria at the face as the face became slippery. A knee jerked up between his legs and he fell sideways, busying himself with his pain, and the fight rolled over him. Then the shelter collapsed with smothering finality, and the anonymous shapes fought their way out and through. Dark figures drew themselves out of the wreckage and fitted away, till the screams of little ones and Piggy's gasps were once more audible. Ralph called out in a quivering voice, all you little ones, go to sleep. We've had a fight with the others. Now go to sleep. Sam and Eric came close and peered at Ralph. Are you two all right? I think so. I got busted. So did I. How's Piggy? They hauled Piggy clear of the wreckage and leaned him against the tree. The night was cool and purged of immediate terror, and Piggy's breathing was a little easier. Did you get hurt, Piggy? Not much. That was Jack and his hunters, said Ralph bitterly. Why can't they leave us alone? We gave them something to think about, said Sam. Honesty compelled him to go on. At least you did. I got mixed up with myself in a corner. I gave one of them what for, said Ralph. I smashed him up all right. He didn't want to come and fight us again in a hurry. And so did I, said Eric. When I woke up, one was kicking me in the face, and I got an awful bloody face, I think, Ralph, but I did him in the end. What did you do? I got my knee up, said Eric with a simple pride, and I hit him with it in the pills. You should have heard him holler. He won't come back in a hurry either, so we didn't do too badly. And Ralph moved suddenly in the dark, and then he heard Eric working at his mouth. What's the matter? Just a tooth loose. And Piggy drew up his legs. You all right, Piggy? I thought they wanted the conch. Ralph trotted down to the pale beach and jumped onto the platform. The conch still glimmered by the chief's seat. He gazed for a moment or two and then went back to Piggy. They didn't take the conch. I know, they didn't come for the conch. They came for something else. Ralph, what am I going to do? Far off along the bow staves of beach, three figures trotted towards the castle rock. They kept away from the forest and down by the water. Occasionally, they sang softly. Occasionally, they turned cartwheels down by the moving streak of the phosphorescence. The chief led them, trotting steadily, exultant in his achievement. He was the chief now in truth, and he had made stabbing motions with his spear. From his left hand dangled Piggy's broken glasses. So they raided them so that they could get Piggy's glasses. Okay. So that was chapter 10. So I'll do a quick summary of this, but then we're actually going to talk about more of these themes and what these characters all mean now. Because at this point, we basically have everything that we need. So chapter 10, it starts off in the next morning, they're bruised, and basically they come to the realization that they had murdered Simon. So they knew it was Simon. They heard his voice. They did see him. They were in such a frenzy that they kept going with it anyways. And all we have left is Piggy, Ralph, Sam and Eric, and the little ones left. So we see that Jack had tied up Wilfred and beat him. Specifically for no reason or no discernible reason. He did it because he could. So one thing they do is they ended up raiding Ralph and stealing Piggy's glasses. Okay. So now I quickly want to go up here to our characters, because at this point, we can start talking about what these characters represent. And some other things as well. So Ralph, our chief, is someone who represents civilization and order. Additionally, one thing to note is that eventually he sees value in Piggy when others do not. Not only does he see value in him, he empowers him. He empowers Piggy to have his own voice, right? When Jack's not there, Piggy can speak and share his thoughts, and people will listen. Now, Jack Jack Merridew represents anarchy and savagery. Ooh. And can everyone see? I can zoom in if not. So Jack also cares about, something to note with Jack is he at this point has had a complete, we would call it a psychological removal from the modern world, right? I'm not going to play with you anymore. And not only that, his cruelty especially comes out when he's wearing a mask. Right? The mask has some power. That's when he's at his most cruel. So we have Piggy here. So we already know quite a bit about him. He's viewed as an outsider, but he's given a voice and power when there's civilization and order. AKA when Ralph's around, right? So when there's civilization and order, he gets a voice and a power. And Piggy represents intelligence and rationalism. So we've also had Simon here. So Simon, as a medical condition. And we haven't talked much about this, but Simon's he's very shy. He doesn't handle pressure well. And one thing with Simon is that he kind of sees something in people. He sees the evil inside, mankind. He had trouble putting it into words when he talks about it. He had trouble putting into words how he doesn't want to see the group descend into chaos. So Simon represents humanity's good nature, the good in humanity. We'll talk more about Roger later. I'm going to skip past him. He'll come later. So we have we'll talk about Roger and Sam and Eric later because they still have their parts to play in the story. Okay, so this beast here. So this beast, what we know is that actually have we gone there yet? Yes, we have. So the beast, quote unquote, beast is within everyone. And now on my book, that's page 158. I'm not sure whether it is on yours. So obviously the beast isn't real, but Jack uses the beast to take control. Not only to take control, take and keep control. Think about it like the Mr. Jones of Animal Farm. So the beast, however, represents the dark side of humanity, human nature, actually. Okay, so now we're kind of going into these objects here and what they represent. So first off, we know, actually, well, the Lord of the Flies is it's the pig's head, right? The pig's head on the stick. Oh, sorry, I have goofed up here. The Lord of the Flies is, come on, the dark side of human nature. No, they both are. They both are. We'll just go with that. They both are. I'll just add the notes to here. So big heads, dark side of human nature, specifically, the inherent evil Inhumans, it talks, it's about chaos and like with, not just chaos, it's fine. Okay, so our conch shell here is a symbol for society. Sorry, and democracy. Right, the rule of law. Ooh. So we know that this conch holds power in meetings, but as they continue to talk, so in the meetings, the boys talk during meetings when it's not their turn. This slowly erodes the power of the civilization, right? This is when they start to break it down. So the authority gets ignored, right? As they ignore the conch, the authority of Ralph, and what they need to do gets ignored as well. And so our fire here symbolizes order and society. Sorry, order and society and the urge to be rescued. So a couple explains of this fire here. So fire brings people together. People, naturally crowd around a fire. It was even referenced in our latest chapter. There was something strange about the fire, right? So not only does it bring people together, fire. Fire refers to like safety as well. You're safe around a fire. So one thing to note is whoever, whatever group has control over fire is that we would call like the ruling group, I guess. And every time the fire was out, so every time there was no fire, the group descends into savagery. And last one here, we have Piggy's glasses. So these represent technology. And science. So they're used more than to light the fire. The glasses are Piggy's contribution to the group, right? He can't physically do squat. He's useless. But he has ideas, right? He has ideas. That's his contribution. Additionally, Piggy sees the world objectively. So the glasses are very much a metaphor. He's seeing through these glasses. He's seeing objectively through these glasses. And as one lens gets broken, he starts to see both sides of this, right? He starts to see the savagery, and he starts to see why other people behave the way they do, but he also sees stuff objectively still. So when we have technology and we have an unhinged society, we usually have destruction. So when savage societies have technology, it can be used as a weapon of destruction. And so now I want to go into our murder, because we have a second one now. We have, of course, Simon, who was beat to death. So Simon got beat to death, and this was intentional and an accident. They knew it was Simon while they were doing it. And they felt bad afterwards. There was some guilt after. But why? Why were they doing this? Why did they kill him? So they were killed. So he got killed because the group, I guess, got carried away is one way of saying it. So the group got carried away. But this death signifies something. So his death was a turning point. Or rather, I guess you could say it's like when Simon died, it symbolized the death of, I don't know, morals. Okay. Okay. So we got about a half hour left here. No, sorry, you're still writing. I'll give you a second. Okay, so I'll come back to this in a second if you are still writing, but I'm just gonna quickly scroll down here. So we are gonna talk about these, we'll fully go over the themes tomorrow. You are welcome to start writing stuff in here if you'd like. If you are not confident though, it is fine to wait. Until we finish the book. So if you want, you can start on the themes of it. But if you're not sure on something, if you're like, I'm not sure like what I could reference here about like loss of innocence. How is that present in this? You can skip past it and that's fine for now. There's just the questions here. I'll give you guys some time to do. And I'll just say do the questions, but before you do that, we'll do the themes tomorrow. I didn't have as much time as I thought. So one, do the questions, but the big one here is before we had previously referenced where we think each character is. So now is kind of our final time to be able to reference where we think they are now. So when we first did this, it was chapter 4. Now we're going to be looking at this as we finish chapter, I think it was 10. So for example, maybe you think that maybe you thought Jack was unconcerned about the signal fire. Maybe you think he's here now, or maybe you think he's the exact same. So just go through here and put where each of these 4 characters, Ralph, Jack, Piggy, Simon, where you feel they belong on here. Now that we know more about the novel and the characters and the plot. So you should have each of these characters marked twice. Again, maybe Piggy, originally was really concerned about the group's generation, and maybe now he doesn't care as much. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe he cares more now. So the first thing you want to do is you just want to do this character mapping thing. The next one is you can just do the questions. You should not have enough time to do the theme, so I'll kind of shelf that to tomorrow then instead.